Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by green hills and colorful wildflowers, there lived a kind and gentle girl named Cinderella. She had golden hair that shone like sunlight and bright blue eyes filled with dreams. But her life was far from a fairy tale. After her mother passed away, her father remarried a cold, cruel woman who had two daughters as selfish as she was. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters treated her like a servant. "Sweep the floors. Wash our dresses. Bring us breakfast," they commanded, while Cinderella worked from dawn to dusk. Her hands became rough from scrubbing floors, and her simple dress was patched and worn. Yet she always found joy in the little things, like singing with the birds or watching the stars at night. One sunny morning, a royal messenger rode into the village on a horse with a shiny silver saddle. He announced, "The king is holding a grand ball at the palace. Every young lady in the kingdom is invited. The prince will choose his bride." The village buzzed with excitement. Cinderella's stepsisters squealed with delight. "We will wear the finest gowns and jewels," they said. Cinderella's heart filled with hope. "Can I go too?" she asked timidly. Her stepmother sneered. "You? Look at you, dirty and ragged. You're not fit for a palace." Her stepsisters laughed cruelly, but Cinderella refused to give up. While they prepared their fancy dresses and hairstyles, Cinderella found an old dress that had belonged to her mother. She worked late into the night, sewing ribbons and lace to make it beautiful. When she showed her stepsisters, they pretended to admire it. Then, with a wicked smile, they ripped the dress apart. "Now you definitely can't go," they said, leaving Cinderella heartbroken and alone. Cinderella ran to the garden and sat beneath a tall oak tree. The moonlight lit up her tear-streaked face as she whispered, "Why can't I have just one moment of happiness?" Suddenly the air sparkled with golden light. A warm voice said, "My dear, don't cry. I'm here to help you." It was her fairy godmother. She wore a silver cloak that shimmered like the stars and held a wand that glowed with magic. "You deserve to go to the ball," she said. With a wave of her wand, she turned a nearby pumpkin into a magnificent golden carriage. Mice scurried into horses with glossy manes, and a lizard became a dashing coachman.
Then, the fairy godmother pointed her wand at Cinderella's torn dress. It transformed into a gown of sparkling blue, with tiny crystals that shimmered like frost in the morning sun. On her feet appeared glass slippers, so delicate they looked like they were made of ice. "Now off you go," said the fairy godmother. "But remember, when the clock strikes midnight, the magic will fade." When Cinderella arrived at the palace, everyone turned to look at her. The chandeliers sparkled, and the marble floors reflected the light like a mirror. The prince, dressed in royal blue, noticed her immediately. "May I have this dance?" he asked, bowing low. Cinderella felt her heart flutter as she placed her hand in his. They danced under the glittering chandeliers, talking and laughing as if no one else was in the room. Time flew by, and soon the clock began to chime midnight. "I must go," Cinderella said, pulling away. "Wait!" The prince called, but she was already running down the grand staircase. As she fled, one of her glass slippers slipped off. She didn't stop to pick it up and disappeared into the night just as the magic wore off. Her gown turned back into rags, and the golden carriage became a pumpkin once more. Out of breath, Cinderella sat in her little room, holding the memory of the magical evening close to her heart. The next morning, the palace was abuzz with news. The prince had found the glass slipper and declared he would marry the girl whose foot fit it. His servants traveled to every house in the kingdom. At Cinderella's house, her stepsisters tried to force their feet into the slipper. One of them even stuffed her toes inside, but the slipper was too small. Finally, Cinderella stepped forward. "May I try?" Her stepmother sneered. "You? Don't waste their time." But the prince's servant nodded. Cinderella sat down and gently slipped her foot into the slipper. It fit perfectly. At that moment, her fairy godmother appeared and transformed Cinderella back into the girl from the ball, wearing her sparkling gown. The prince, who had accompanied the servant, fell to one knee. "It's you," he said with a smile. "Will you marry me?" Cinderella's stepsisters and stepmother stared in shock as she said, "Yes." Soon, she and the prince were married in a grand celebration. Cinderella forgave her stepfamily, but chose to live happily ever after in the palace, where kindness and love filled her days. The end. Good night, honey.